He'd lost his hat, somewhere between London and Hawke's Run. Of the dozen different things now trying Adrian's temper, it was the lost hat that made it snap. An elegant hat, polished boots and a flawless white cravat, tied in tronc d'amour and artfully creased, separated a fashionable London gentleman from a plain country squire. He'd given up his left boot and his cravat as lost before he'd left the city last night, the latter being covered in vomit and the former— well, he wasn't entirely sure what had happened to his boot, but it wasn't on his foot. He must have lost it when Lady Pamela shoved him out the window. But a gentleman's hat— that was one step too bloody far. A beaver hat was a precious, hallowed thing, akin to a holy relic for God's sake. Practical, too. He ventured a glance into the merciless glare above, wincing as pain lanced his skull and hard white sunlight seared his eyeballs. Was it necessary for it to shine quite so brightly? He'd happily give up one remaining boot for a comforting layer of London smog. Really, it was just this sort of unreasonable cheerfulness that made people detest the country. Here, in particular. If he'd known when he'd left his townhouse last night that he'd find himself here, he'd have downed a whole bottle of brandy instead of half, but it was too bloody late now. Sobriety had caught up to him somewhere near Hoddesdon, which was a great pity, as he preferred to remain as close to unconscious as possible whenever he was in the vicinity of Hawke's Run. Damned if anyone who saw him right now would recognize him as the fashionable, charming Lord Hawke. He looked far closer to the dissipated barbarian he actually was. And that smell— stale smoke, regurgitated brandy, and the thick, cloying stench of Lady Pamela's perfume. Taken together, it was enough to make him— He gagged, bile burning his throat, but he choked it back before it spewed from his lips and splashed into his lap. He reined in his horse at the end of the drive and waited until his stomach ceased its rebellion before running the tip of his tongue cautiously over his parched lips. This was no time to cast up his accounts. He was about to appear at his country estate after 6, or was it 7, long months of unexplained absence, and he was reeking of wicked deeds as it was. Breeches splattered with vomit was doing it a bit too brown. "Oh dear, this is a conundrum." The soft exclamation came out of nowhere, startling him into another ill-fated glance into the remorseless sky above. He caught a glimpse of bare dark branches clawing at the blue, and a flash of something yellow. It wasn't the sun this time. A remarkably large bird, then. He bloody well hoped not, as any bird such an aggressive shade of yellow was sure to be a vicious predator. He snapped his eyes shut to prevent his retinas from bursting into flames, but they flew open again when something sharp struck him in the face. What the devil? He despised the country, yes, but this was the first sign he'd ever had it despised him in return. Oh no, that wasn't meant to happen. This time he took the precaution of shading his eyes with his hand before glancing up. He could see nothing but shifting shadows at first, but as his vision adjusted, he caught a glimpse of the hem of a shockingly yellow cloak, and a slender foot, clad in a worn half-boot, dangling from one of the branches above his head.